going to try to give you a very quick overview of our circulatory system. This is the beginning of our body systems unit. However, this is not an anatomy class, so we are not going to focus necessarily on the structures so much, but on how they work and how do they accomplish the job that they are supposed to be doing. And for that, again, I want to emphasize that up to now, through the year, we have been looking at how different components of our body works, from enzymes to DNA, so a lot of processes that work inside the cells and that we cannot necessarily see with our eyes. But right now is the time when we're going to start using all that information, and we're going to have to try to put it together to see how the combined action of all those little processes that we studied all year long now come together and allow us to have the bodies that we have and allow our bodies to work the way they work. That is fantastic. So from the circulatory system, this is probably one of the basic systems because it's the one that integrates everything in our body. So you might overlook it, or some people focus just on the heart and the veins and arteries and how it pumps. However, we're going to focus really in the important stuff, that is how it integrates everything and how it connects with cells and how it works at delivering everything that we need for our bodies to work. So, having said that, let's get going. So basically, we've been working with cells, and we know that our cells need to exchange materials with the environment. The environment means outside the cells. So now it doesn't matter if you are unicellular or multicellular, you need to get certain things in and certain things out. So what do you need for in? Definitely you need fuels for energy, things like carbohydrates, glucose in particular. You need nutrients, even though it's a terrible word that I profoundly dislike. Other things that you need besides glucose. You need amino acids. You need the basic components of nucleic acids, the monomers of nucleic acids. You need vitamins. You need some calcium. You need some sodium. You need a number of things that are carried in your blood and that your cells need to get from some place. So it's not just glucose for energy, but it's all the other things that they need to build the inside of the cell. So starting with amino acids, so nucleotides, nitrogen bases, fatty acids, glycerol, some cholesterol, some sodium, some potassium, some iron, you name it. The cells need all that stuff. Of course, they need oxygen. If you're doing cellular respiration, aerobic cellular respiration, you're going to need oxygen. And then, of course, if your cells are alive and functioning properly, they are going to generate some waste products. From cellular respiration, from aerobic cellular respiration, you're going to generate CO2 that needs to be eliminated and removed from your body. And from any metabolism, any process that involves any of the nitrogen compounds that we have in our body, from nucleic acids to amino acids, when you process those things and you break them down, anything with nitrogen, you're going to have a waste product called urea or ammonia, either one of those. And as we will see next time when we do excretory systems, this is also a critical component that needs to be eliminated from your body because it's highly toxic. So your cells are constantly in need of something and trying to get rid of things. And if you are one cell organism in the environment, everything gets in and out by diffusion, and it's very simple. If you are a many-celled organism, a multicellular organism, remember we just finished evolution, multicellular is great from the point of view that allows specialization of cells, but it's pretty bad in terms of getting what you need. So if you are a unicellular, you interchange all you need with the environment. However, if you are multicellular, the cells on the outside are great, no problem doing diffusion. However, the cells in the middle are going to have a hard time getting what they need. Now remember, diffusion is the most common process because it just doesn't require energy, and it works basically by moving things from an area of high concentration to low concentration, no energy required. The problem, remember, is very slow. Even though if the concentration gradient is very steep, diffusion rate will increase, as we have learned before, but still never enough to satisfy the needs of mainly the cells that are located towards the inside. So because of that is when you become multicellular and you develop a big organism, you need a circulatory system to basically deliver everything around. So what needs to be transported? Basically, as I said before, nutrients and fuels that are going to come from your digestive system. Let's start with glucose, fatty acids, glycerol, cholesterol, amino acids, nucleotides, basically. What else? Vitamins. Remember all those vitamins that you consume that basically are coenzymes or cofactors that you are going to need in your body for everything to work properly. Respiratory gases, you need your oxygen. For aerobic cellular respiration, you need to eliminate CO2, and again, you're going to get that through your respiratory system, a way to get it in and out. If you are a terrestrial organism, you're going to be using lungs for that. If you are an aquatic organism, you are going to be using gills for that process of getting the oxygen out of the environment where you live and transferring it to your cells inside. Now, you're going to have a number of intracellular wastes, byproducts of your metabolism. Water, sometimes you have too much water, you need to get rid of it, or you need it in. So water is going to be one of the things that you move in and out. Salts, sodium, potassium are the most common ones, calcium. Nitrogen waste in the form of urea or ammonia. Again, anything that involves the metabolism or the breakdown of compounds that have nitrogen, basically nucleotides or amino acids, you are going to generate nitrogen waste that needs to be removed very quickly from your body, because most nitrogen waste is highly toxic, as we will see next time. Now, what else is in your blood? Well, besides all this that we need, we also have a number of protective agents that are constantly circulating. We have some defenses that are part of our immune system. Two components. The first one is cellular. So we have what we know as white blood cells. Sorry about that. We have your white blood cells. That, as we will see, there are several different types, and they actually phagocytize and destroy foreign organisms. And we have molecules, a type of protein that in general they are called antibodies. These are proteins, and remember, proteins are large molecules made out of amino acids. These are proteins that circulate through your blood constantly and that can target basically foreign organisms that don't belong in your body. So you have the cells, basically these are living things finding stuff, and then you have antibodies that are kind of like chemical weapons against organisms and other things that shouldn't be inside your body. And we will see this too when we do our immune system. What else is in your blood that is critical? Well, we have circulating constantly in our blood, in our circulatory system, blood clotting agents. Platelets that are actually cells or pieces of cells that work they plug, all of them just pile up on each other and make like a nice plug. But in addition to platelets, we have a protein also, a protein called fibrinogen, however you say it, that basically forms a mesh of filaments that helps also block the place where you have a leak in your circulatory system. Nice patching system. So you can have either cells or you can have these fibers, this protein called fibrinogen that is going to block it. Now, fibrinogen is usually in the inactive form, and when it becomes activated, it becomes fibrin. It's the same process that we saw in our enzymes in the digestive system. Remember, pepsin in your stomach is not released as pepsin, otherwise it will destroy the cells where it's created. It is formed. It is released as pepsinogen, And under the right pH conditions, pepsinogen change shape, acidic pH, and acquires the right structure, and that is when it's functional, and pepsin can be used to break down all the proteins, basically chopped proteins into the component amino acids. So concepts that we already see keep on coming up, and now again, as I said, I hope you have not taken any shortcuts in this class and that you have really taken the time to learn this, because now it's coming together. So this is a great time to be here. Finally, what else is in your blood circulating? Regulatory hormones. Remember, our body needs to maintain homeostasis, and that in great part is regulated by our nervous system, as we were going to see again later, but also by the circulating hormones that send messages to the cells, cell communication basically at work. So the blood is the liquid that goes through your circulatory system that integrates everything, and it's basically a window into whatever is happening in your body. If everything is working well, the different components of the blood are in balance and perfect. If not, we have a problem. And that is why, if you think about it, if you are really sick and they don't know what it is, it's one of these sicknesses that is not just typical symptoms, the first thing a doctor does is they ask you for a blood test, because by looking at the composition of the different things in your blood, they can diagnose if any of them is out of balance and figure out what's going on there. So we're going to focus on the vertebrate circulatory system. Now, we know that vertebrates, the lowest vertebrates, from the evolutionary point of view, the most primitive are the fishes. And so we need to look a little bit at how they work. Remember, we're not going to focus on the names of the structures, but the most important thing is how they work and how they help us maintain our bodies working and the evolutionary meaning of everything. So, vertebrates have what is called a closed circulatory system. If we had time, we'll study other circulatory systems that are open, actually. The blood just sloshes around and then comes together. But we're going to focus in this closed circulatory system. So we are going to focus on fish. Fishes have two chambers, an atrium and a ventricle. Amphibians that have three chambers, two atriums and one ventricle. And finally, mammals and also birds that have four chambers, two atria and two ventricles. Now, there are two things that you need to think about. Every time I talk about this, I need you to think of hoses, pipes, and I hope throughout your life you have played with this, maybe watering the lawn or washing the car, because that intuitive sense of how water moves and what happens when you play with it is going to come in handy to here. Mainly the two concepts are pressure, the push of the water through the hose, and also the speed at which the water moves, and the volume. So three things that we need to think about. So let's start with the fishes. Fishes have, as I said, an atrium and a ventricle. And I want you to become familiar with these diagrams and understand them. So here is what is the heart. Blood moves in a closed circuit in one direction. When blood is pumped through the ventricle contracts, squeezes the blood, and all the blood goes first to the gills of the fishes. Blue represents a blood that has no oxygen, deoxygenated blood, and red usually is used to represent blood that has oxygen, that carries full amount of oxygen in the red blood cells. So the ventricle is pushing the blood to the gills, because in the gills is where the oxygen is going to diffuse in and out from the ocean, from the water or fresh water. So here is where you have the exchange of gases by simple diffusion with the water around. So push. Now when the ventricle contracts, it's a high push, high pressure, high speed, because it's only one vessel. Now when it gets to the when it gets to the gills, it divides in many capillaries. Now, when you increase the surface area of the piping system, if you know anything about hoses, if you connect multiple hoses to one spigot, what you're going to find out is that you have less water coming through each one of the hoses and less pressure too. So here is high pressure, high speed. When it breaks into all those capillaries to get all the oxygen at the gills, the pressure and the speed drops significantly. Then all those capillaries converge again when they are coming out of the gills into a couple of major blood vessels. So now the speed starts increasing, but the pressure is still low. You lost a lot of pressure here when you spread out too thin. So now you have the blood moving at low pressure, and now all this blood that is fully oxygenated needs to go to the whole body and deliver the oxygen. So very fast, and now we are barely moving to the body, not barely, but much slower. And to be able to deliver the oxygen to the body, these major blood vessels need to split again into these smaller vessels that we call the capillaries. And guess what's going to happen when you increase that surface area inside? Again, the speed and the pressure is going to drop significantly. So, this is a low pressure system delivering oxygen to the body. The good thing is that all the body gets highly oxygenated blood. So nothing is perfect. Low pressure, so blood is moving kind of slowly. I'm coming, I'm bringing your oxygen, don't worry, it's gonna get there. And then it's full of oxygen, so that's good. So that kind of limits a little bit the range of activity and motion of the fishes. Remember that oxygen is needed for aerobic cellular respiration. Now, next improvement on the system of the delivery system is what we find in the amphibians. Again, through natural selection, what you can see here, amphibians, they have two atrium. Instead of one atrium, we have two atria. But now we have one ventricle still, one ventricle. But there is a beauty here. Instead of just having one way out of the ventricle, there are two ways out. One way, if you follow here, the atrium is the one that receives the blood from everywhere. Blood comes back, goes down to the ventricle, and the ventricle squeezes. And now you have two pipes going out of the ventricle. One that takes the blood through the whole body, so high pressure to the body, awesome, you want pressure, you want speed in the delivery, high pressure of blood going to all of the body, and also you have high pressure of the blood going to the lungs and skin for gas exchange. Remember that amphibians have the most primitive lungs. They are the first ones, so they are like the beta model. And a lot of gas exchange occurs through the skin. So great system, because now by having two pipes coming out of the ventricle, you get high pressure delivered to everywhere. There is a problem though. When the blood goes to the lungs or skin for oxygenation, when it comes back to the atrium here, the blood from the body also comes back to the atrium, and both of those mix in the ventricle. Oxygenated blood and not oxygenated blood. So it's kind of a 50% level of oxygenation when it gets mixed in the ventricle. When the ventricle contracts, the blood basically that is going to the lungs and the blood that is going to the body for delivery to the tissues really is 50% oxygenated because it mixed there. So, great improvement in terms of the pressure. However, we lost some of the oxygen we have, so there is nothing perfect in this world. High pressure, awesome, but the amount of oxygen is still relatively low. Still, these creatures, remember, they are ectotherms. They tend to live in places that are relatively warm because they cannot tolerate cold temperatures. They are relatively slow, in part because they have low oxygen in the body. They have no way to get more oxygen. And no oxygen means no ATP produced by cellular respiration. Now, from the evolutionary point of view, here we end up with the culmination, the best heart ever. And this is what we call the four-heart chamber. That is what birds and mammals got independently. Remember, mammals come from one type of dinosaur, birds come from another type of dinosaur independently. Both birds and mammals evolved a four-chamber heart. Remember, when you get to the same place coming from different ancestors, that is called convergent evolution. So this is an awesome example of convergent evolution, just like the fins of fishes and a fusiform body for aquatic organisms. And wings. All right, so here we go. Two atrium, two ventricle, and now what you have is the ventricles are separated. So in all these examples, the best way to understand them, and you have to do it, no more shortcuts please, put your finger and follow the flow of blood and try to figure out in your mind and using your finger what happens. If I start here in the ventricle, go up, high pressure, shoom, deliver all this oxygenated blood to the body, come back, but notice I come back to the other side. When I come back here, the ventricle contracts and sends me to the lungs to get oxygenated. From the lungs, I come back, and I come back to the other side where I can repeat my circuit of going to the body. So, ventricles contract, and you have two ways that you go. You go to the body, and you go to the lungs for oxygenation. Very good. And then when the blood comes back, the ventricles are separated, so there is no mixing like here. So you keep oxygenated and not oxygenated blood separate. And that means that you're going to have high pressure all over your body. And also you're going to have high oxygen being delivered to the body all the time. And this is critical because when you have oxygen, you can do aerobic respiration, you can have energy. And now, because of this, you are able to allow for the evolution of endothermy, because endothermy requires humongous amounts of energy. And only here, with the evolution of the four-chamber heart, is when endothermy was basically able to evolve. Before, without this, no chance, even if everything was in place. Alright? So, very good. So I hope you understand that and the basics of this principle. So again, two-chamber in the fish, three-chamber in amphibians, common ventricle. Don't worry about the reptiles. Here we are going kind of an in-between stage. Forget about the reptiles, don't get confused, and focus on bird and mammals, the four-chamber there, and that allowed for the evolution of endothermy. So, what is so great about this, besides endothermy? If you have high pressure everywhere to the lungs and to the body, that you are allowed basically to make your body bigger because you are going to have enough blood pressure to send that blood everywhere. So the evolution of the four-chamber heart allowed for an increase in body size, which you say, what's the big deal about it? Well, if you're a herbivore and you happen to find, or a carnivore for that matter, and you happen to find a good food source, guess what? You can fill it up. You can eat as much as you want because you have a big body, which also means you have a big digestive system. So you can eat as much as you want, and that can be stored later, as fat and other things for times when you don't have as many food around. I mentioned earlier the four-chamber heart, because of the high concentration of oxygen, allows for the evolution of endothermy. That, as a consequence, remember, if you are an endotherm, like birds and mammals, now you can colonize any area of the planet. You are not limited to the areas with reasonable temperatures. Now, if you are a bird again, this allowed, obviously, for the colonization of air because you require more energy to fly. You require more. You have to be an endotherm because temperatures drop as you go up. and basically is a full circle. One important thing that you might not have thought about it, but an endotherm requires at least 10 times more energy than an ectotherm. And if you recall, when we did cellular respiration, we used the example of alligators. An alligator similar size to a human basically needs about 100 calories or less per day, and is all it needs. However, an endotherm like us, we need about at least 2,000 calories, and about 75% of those calories sometimes are just used to keep you warm. So very important concept, maybe not 75, but it's relatively high. We need extra fuel, we need to eat more, but also we need more oxygen to maintain that. So, just, we've been talking about it, but just in case you don't know these basics, the 4-chamber heart, or any heart really, you have atrium and ventricle. The atrium is always on the top, is the part that receives the blood from the body or anywhere else. And the ventricle is the bottom part of the heart that pumps and sends it everywhere. So atrium, come here, think of the atrium of a house, that's where you go and enter. And the ventricle is where it squeezes and sends everything. You also have 3 blood vessels always part of your circulatory system, the arteries. And arteries always, A for away. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Doesn't matter if it has oxygen or not, irrelevant. Arteries carry oxygen away from the heart, and veins return the blood to the heart. And in between, if one is taking blood away, the other one is returning it, at some point they have to get together to transfer the blood from one to each other. And that is accomplished through the capillaries that we'll see in a minute what they are made about. So, basic blood vessels here. So we start with the arteries, and it's very important that you look at the diagrams and not just memorize these again. Most of this class, if you do the footwork and you read the textbook and you look at it and you understand it, that's all you need. So here we go, arteries. Arteries are the ones that carry the blood away from the heart. They have, here's a nice diagram. Arteries versus veins is a comparative diagram. Both blood vessels have basically 3 layers. Have an endothelium, think of epithelium, a single layer of cells. Then is surrounded by smooth muscle that can contract basically, and we do not control smooth. So that's your nervous system controlling it. But a nice layer of smooth muscle. This is the same muscle that you have in your digestive system. We don't control it, nervous system by itself control it. And then you have connective tissue around, kind of like bandages wrapping it, protecting it. So this is the arteries. Arteries usually have much thicker walls, and arteries are very elastic. So here's a nice artery. They are elastic. They can squeeze, compress, very nice. And they are narrower. I have a vein and an artery. Artery has a narrow cavity, but they are very elastic, very flexible. And this is important because since when the heart contracts, I need you to picture this, the ventricle contracts and sends the blood out through this, and it's a massive amounts of blood. So what happens to the arteries? To support that pressure of blood coming through, the arteries kind of bulge a little bit to kind of accommodate that pressure. If they were kind of stiff, when you push it really hard, they would just blow up. But because they are elastic, they are able to accommodate that pressure and then recoil and go back to their normal thickness. So very good, because this helps you maintain even pressure throughout the system. Now, what happens when you are dealing with a vein? A vein, I'll use the same diagram. Here is an artery, narrow, a vein. Veins are kind of, I cannot do this, and this you can see is pretty stiff. This is very floppy. This doesn't do the same. This is very stiff. This is a vein. Veins still have the endothelial tissue. They have less smooth muscle and less connective tissue around, and they're very stiff, and these basically are the ones that bring the blood back to the heart. And to help that, since they're not elastic, veins always have valves. So the blood is going up, and to prevent blood going down, since these guys are not elastic, among other things, they have valves to prevent the backflow of blood. Now, the problem also is that since they are not elastic, if you increase the pressure too much on this, what's going to happen? Yes, they blow up. Not very often, but they just kind of get floppy and soft. Varicose veins, everybody? Varicose veins. Now, so here we have the artery carrying the blood from the heart, very flexible, accommodate everything, superheroes. They divide into smaller and smaller vessels that we call arterioles. These arterioles divide into smaller and smaller and smaller vessels that we call capillaries. Now the capillaries are basically one layer thick. They are kind of microscopic. You might see them in your eyes, you know, when you have red eyes and you look and you see a single line. That's a capillary. So the endothelium is basically a single layer of cells, and basically they have a little membrane around just to protect them, but that's it. And so all this blood basically spreads out into these millions and millions and millions of miles of capillaries in your body, deliver everything that they need, and then they come together again into bigger and bigger vessels to return to the heart. And those vessels that are bringing it back to the heart are the veins. Now, just a little diagram here for the veins to emphasize again the valves that they have. So that's a vein. The valve prevents the backflow. But also very important, think of gravity. We are vertical things. Gravity is pulling our blood down. From your little toes, blood needs to go back to your heart that is up. Yes, your heart is pushing, but that pressure, after you go through the capillaries, dies. So when you're trying to come back, the blood really has a hard time. So blood is helped in part by the pressure of the other blood pushing, but also because when you move, actually, you move your extremities, your muscles are contracting and are squeezing these veins. And when they squeeze the veins, since you have a valve there, what's the only place that the blood can go? Up. That's why you need to move. That's why when you go on an airplane or you're seated for too long, what do they tell you? Get up and move, because that helps the blood circulate. And that's why when we're in class and I give you a break, I said, get up and move so your blood can actually move. You need those muscles to squeeze so you can get the blood moving, mainly in your extremities. When this doesn't happen, and these veins get floppy and blood puddles down, that's when you have varicose veins or spider veins, all those ugly things. Right? So I hope you get an understanding of how capillaries and veins and arteries work. But if you think of a capillary, capillaries are so thin that your red blood cells have to go single file through a capillary. Single file through a capillary is the most amazing thing. And they reach every cell in your body. Every cell in your body is within reach of a capillary. So just imagine how many capillaries you have. So what happens? Remember, we are doing all this because your blood is carrying your glucose, your amino acids, your oxygen, your waste products, and they need to be delivered or taken away. It's carrying also the hormones that are telling your cells what to do. Hey, here comes insulin, saying, please let glucose in. Here comes testosterone that is going to get through the membrane and become a transcription factor when it gets the receptor inside the cytoplasm. All these things are traveling through your blood. So what happens? Now remember, your blood has all those things that we have mentioned, but your blood also has water, obviously, and it's mostly water. The liquid part of your blood is called the plasma. So a lot of water for obvious reasons. So what's happening, and this is very important here, when your blood is coming through your arteries, it's high pressure because the heart just squeezes. High pressure. Now, because it is high pressure when you get to the capillaries, and remember these are single cells kind of, the high pressure lets a lot of the liquid, the water, and anything dissolved in the water, salts, glucose dissolved in the water, basically diffuse or just squeeze out. It's like a leaky one. So much pressure, you squeeze and water just squeezes out. So a lot of the water with all the stuff dissolved on it comes out of the capillaries and becomes what is interstitial fluid. That's the fluid in between your cells. I mean, if you cut yourself, you know that you have liquidy stuff all over. That's interstitial fluid that is always coming out of your capillaries. Basically, water with a lot of dissolved compounds on it. Now, this is important because when this comes out, remember that the cells are all around here. So this allows all this interstitial fluid with all the glucose and other molecules on it to kind of bathe the cells and allow them to do diffusion if they need to diffuse easily into the cells. Now, there is so much fluid leaking out of your capillaries, and you know that because if you don't do much, sometimes when you travel, your legs or feet swell. So much liquid coming out of the capillaries is because the blood pressure is higher than the osmotic pressure. Aha! Remember, I told you diffusion. So, liquid coming out with a lot of things diffused. Now, think of what happens inside the capillary. After all this liquid comes out, what is left in the capillary? Pretty much very large proteins that cannot squeeze out, all the cells, and that's pretty much it. And a few other large molecules that cannot squeeze out. So, large molecules and cells. So it's kind of dry there, whatever is left. Very little liquid, because the liquid came out, but there are all these chunky proteins and other large molecules. So, guess what happens then? Inside the capillaries, that becomes basically a hypertonic solution, and outside the capillaries, because of all the liquid that diffuse out by pressure, here you have a hypotonic solution. So what's going to happen? Basically, water is going to diffuse back into the capillaries. This interstitial fluid diffuses in because right here, after you have this capillary bed, the blood pressure plummets. There's no more pressure here. You squeeze it all out. So low blood pressure, but the osmotic pressure is very high because this is a hypertonic and this is a hypotonic solution. So, in the first half, fluid and solutes flow out of the capillaries because of the high blood pressure. And in the second part, the interstitial fluid flows back into the capillaries because of osmosis, basically. This is a hypertonic solution inside, and that's it. Very interesting. You can do some numbers. About 85% of all the liquid that was squeezed out is going to return to the capillaries. And here you have all the liquid coming out because of the blood pressure. But then blood pressure drops, but then you have osmotic pressure, the hypotonic and hypertonic here. Now, 85% of the fluid returns to the capillaries and returns to circulation and goes back to the heart. What happens to the other 15% that doesn't make it? The other 15% actually is taken up by this structure, your lymph you know you have that clear liquidy all around. Sometimes when you pop things, you get clear liquid. That's lymph. That's interstitial fluid, basically. And we have a parallel system, very similar to our circulatory system all over our body, the lymphatic system, that collects all this extra interstitial fluid and returns it to our heart. So here we go, beautiful system. This is not your circulatory, this is a parallel system that we call the lymphatic system, and it's going to play a role when we do immune system too. So these lymph vessels all over your body collecting this 15% of interstitial fluid, but also you're going to see that besides this, you also have what we call lymph nodes attached to this. And you're familiar with the lymph nodes in your inguinal canal here, the lymph nodes in your neck, and the lymph nodes kind of in this area. So, beautiful lymphatic system, please keep it in mind, because besides the interstitial fluid, this also transports white blood cells. And since you know white blood cells are part of our defense mechanism, start getting the idea that this system is very important, the lymph nodes, very important in our immune system. Now, we said, okay, so 15% of the interstitial fluid is catched by this. When do they get together with the blood? This system of canals and network of vessels also gets together and joins the vena cava that goes into your heart right before it enters your heart. They fuse together and drops the extra liquid collected right in there. So it returns it to the blood system. Now, mammalian circulation, I think as an educated person you need to understand how this works. Unfortunately, all these drawings are always a nightmare. Mainly when you look at a real heart, there is no rhyme, it's very complicated, and it's not very useful to learn and understand the system. So I'm gonna right now take a low-tech approach, and I'm gonna show you how to understand and learn this once and for all and never forget it. So if you have a piece of paper, please get it ready. This is what you need. You need a 4 square, basically, that's your heart. Here is your lungs, basically, and here is your body. So very schematic and simple diagram. So do that. And so what I want you to understand is, if we have the heart like that, that heart would be the same as having my heart right here, the 4 squares, where here is my right, and this is my right. So this is the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Right, left. So just like the diagram. So when you do this, you are going to do it with me, and then you're going to put it in front of you and look at your heart to understand it. So let's start. We are going to start right here in the left ventricle. Notice that I made it slightly larger and thicker because this is very muscular. It's the biggest chamber, because out of here comes a blood vessel that we call the aorta. It's an artery, it's your aorta, and this is gonna take blood to your whole body. This is the main blood vessel, the aorta. So all the blood from the left ventricle comes out through the aorta. The aorta starts breaking up into smaller and smaller branches that I'm just gonna represent like this here. And those basically are gonna become all the capillaries that are gonna go through your body. So this is what we call a capillary bed. So the aorta takes it. So this blood obviously is delivering all the good stuff to the body. Now all these capillaries join together, of course, and they are going to join together in a blood vessel that we call the vena cava. So this is your vena cava. And all this blood, after going through your body, is going to be returned to the heart, and it's going to return to the right atrium, right there. So we came full circle back to the right atrium. Now, when you are in the right atrium here, what's the only place your blood can go? It can only go to the right ventricle. And once you are in the right ventricle, it needs to go out. So from the right ventricle, it goes out here. And you might guess where it's going. From here, we are going to have an underpass here in the drawing. And this is going to your lungs. But if you know any Spanish, lungs in Spanish, lung is pulmón. So this blood is coming right here to your lungs. Now, what's the name of this blood vessel? It's going out of the heart. So if it goes out of the heart, it's called an artery. And if it's an artery and it's going to the lungs, it's called the pulmonary artery. And this is where I want you to use your logic and common sense, and don't memorize this. If you start drawing it, you should be able to pull it all together using your beautiful common sense that all of you guys have. So now here comes this blood. Notice this is the blood that had come from the heart, from the body, right atrium, went to the right ventricle, went up to the lungs. In the lungs, obviously, it's gonna get totally oxygenated. It's gonna get all the oxygen in, CO2 out, and then they're gonna come out of the lungs. And where is it gonna go once it comes out of the lungs? There's not much any other places to go except for the left atrium. So the blood is coming right there. Now, what's the name of this blood vessel? It's going back to the heart, so it's a vein. And of course, it's coming from the lungs. So this is your pulmonary vein. So that basically makes a nice circuit. And now if you grab your beautiful finger and you follow this, pretend that you're a red blood cell, you can go down to the ventricle, out through the aorta, all your body, come back, right atrium, right ventricle, whew, lungs, 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 back to the same spot. So it's a closed circuit and you keep on doing it, doing it, doing it. This is a simplified form, but this is the essence. Now you can complicate it as much as you want to, because when the aorta comes out, the aorta splits in other branches. When the vena cava comes in, this is the vena cava coming from the bottom of your body. We have another one coming from the upper part of your body. So this would be the inferior vena cava, and the one coming from the top, bringing all the blood from the head, would be the superior vena cava. So we can increase the complexity, but it's a lot of common sense. But I want you to keep it simple, because once you understand the basics and you can do it on your own every single time, then you can start adding little things and just use common sense and not memorization that you're gonna forget immediately. So now let's look at where the oxygen is, okay? So this is coming from the lungs. That has oxygen. This has oxygen, this has oxygen, this has oxygen. And that's the end of the oxygen, because here the oxygen is going to be delivered. Here the oxygen is going to be delivered to the tissues, and in exchange we're going to pick up CO2, CO2, CO2 that is gonna go back there to the lungs to be exchanged. So nice circle, and I hope this helps you understand this. The real test here is look at it and then grab a piece of paper and try to do it on your own with these basic names. If you can do it, you're gonna be amazed at how much you can understand. So we're gonna try to finish this up now. Now that we have a good understanding of the pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation, I want to take a little side trip and a break here and address something that is important. Of course, everything is important. The heart. The heart is a muscle made out of cardiac muscle. Is different from all the other muscles, and you don't need to worry about it because your heart has its own pacemaker, a nervous system that regulates the impulses. But since it's a muscle and it's the only muscle that contracts non-stop since you are kind of become alive until you die, requires a high amount of oxygen, a lot of glucose, and to work properly. So, in addition of all these vessels that you see going out and taking the blood to the whole body, when these vessels go out, here the aorta that is going out, there are some little branches that basically return and bring blood to the muscle itself, to the heart itself. So you can see here the heart, and these red are basically arteries that left the main one, the aorta, and then return to bring blood, become smaller, 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 and capillaries, to bring blood to the heart itself, because you need a lot. Now, one of these is the coronary artery, the famous coronary artery. Now, what happens when this coronary artery, because you have a lot of deposition of fat or whatever, gets blocked right there, for example? If that coronary artery gets blocked, basically there is not blood coming to this lower part of the heart. And here are the ventricles, the squeeze. When you don't get any blood to the lower part of the heart, the bottom part here, no oxygen, no glucose, and that means no cellular respiration, no ATP, basically stops beating. And that is what's called a heart attack. And that's when that part of the heart dies, technically. That is a heart attack, basically because of a blockage there. You interrupt the flow of blood that is feeding the muscle itself. It's not the flow here inside in the piping system. It's the blood that is actually feeding the muscle itself. That is a heart attack. And what do people do if they catch you on time or they see it coming and you get medical attention? Then, okay, you have a nice blockage there. Oh, let's grab something there and make a nice bridge using a vein from someplace else in your body. And that is what's called a bypass. They basically take a vein from your leg and make a nice bridge bypassing that little obstruction that you have there. And that's a bypass. If you have a triple bypass, you have 3 bridges there, and so forth. So if you want to talk some more about this, there are other type of procedures that they do. Sometimes they put a little balloon with a stent and they blow up the balloon and they open up the blockage. So we can talk about this if you are interested, but for now, let's just leave it at that. Here you have a nice bypass. You see the blue vein just connecting and skipping the area where you had the little obstruction. You're familiar with blood pressure. We've been talking about pressure, high pressure. We love high pressure. However, very high pressure is pretty bad, because if your pressure is out of control, what's going to happen? Yeah, these guys are pretty elastic, but if you increase the pressure beyond the acceptable, they are going to blow up. So, not good. So you have to keep your blood pressure under control. That means you have to regulate the volume of blood, among other things, and we can talk about that too. Remember, if you have too much salt, you're going to get more water. The volume of blood increases, and when you have more volume, it's more pressure. It's all related. It's all osmosis and diffusion. It's amazing. If you have high blood pressure, how do they bring the pressure down? Among other things, they tell you to reduce the salt intake, because less salt means less water in your blood, and you have less volume, and with that decreases your pressure. Amazing. Your pressure, if you don't know it, you should know it. Normal pressure is about 120, whoops, wrong color. 120 over 80 about, and these are millimeters of mercury, not millimeters, milliliters of mercury, because it's a mercury column that goes. How do they measure it? You've probably seen that they put a nice cuff. Here is your artery with the blood moving. Every time your heart pushes, remember everybody, your blood gets out, the arteries kind of blow up a little bit to accommodate the increase in flow. So when they put a cuff, basically they squeeze until they block the pass of blood, actually. There's no blood moving through your arteries right there. That's why they inflate it so hard. And then they deflate it very slow while they listen to hear the first time that the blood starts going through it. Because that's when the pressure of the blood trying to get through is even with the pressure of the cuff. That's how they measure. Equal pressures. So then when the blood is coming, that's when they do the reading, the first time that they hear that blood gushing through the arteries, and that's one of the readings. And so the 120, always the first reading, is the reading of the pressure when your heart squishes. That's your systole, the squeeze heart. The other reading, the 80, is after your ventricles squeeze, they relax, and is the pressure with which they fill up, technically. So out and then relax. So high pressure, and then the lower pressure is this one. So systole, diastole. My pronunciation might be off, but you can figure it out. All right, systolic and diastolic. Systolic, 150 is pretty high. 120 is about normal, and the diastolic is usually about 80 when it's your heart filling back up. Now, what we mentioned very quickly, what controls the heart rate? Well, you have this is a beautiful drawing of the heart. In the atrium up there, you have something called the sinoatrial node. You don't need to remember the names, just the function, because now we have an electrical system working that is going to tie up with our nervous system, review in a couple of days. So here you have, this generates the impulse. This is called the pacemaker of the heart, because by itself regulates the heartbeat. Pum, pum. Sends a nervous impulse and goes around. So the first things that contract are the atria. The atria contract, send blood to the ventricles. Now, over here there is another one called the atrioventricular node. So the signals come through here, they get to this one, and this one is like, hold on a second, and delays the impulse a notch, and then a split second later sends the impulse to the ventricles. So from here to the atrium and to this one takes a chill pill, basically delays the signal and then sends it. And the purpose of delaying the signal a notch is, remember, electrical impulses travel very fast. So this contract, choom, and this delay here allows for the ventricles to fill in with the blood and then squeeze out. Because if not, everything will squeeze together and there will be nothing there. So it's chum chum, chum chum, chum chum, chum chum, chum chum, chum chum, chum chum. and this is the one that regulates the delay. That's why the heartbeat is always a two-step kind of thing. So I hope you understand this. It's just very simple, but it's important, because when this is not working properly, that's when people have arrhythmia problems or irregular heartbeat. And when they have irregular heartbeat, if you know anybody, like my dad, for example, this is not working, they need to put an artificial pacemaker that they put it here, and basically takes over this one and regulates the heartbeat for the rest of your life. Alright? So your natural pacemaker that does it on its own, or if you have problems, you can have an artificial pacemaker implanted with a little battery that has to be replaced every so many years. So I hope that helps you understand the importance of our circulatory system, why it's important to move, and most importantly, I really need you to understand all the things that are traveling through our circulatory system, and with this interstitial fluid business, how they get out and how to get back into the blood. In class you will receive this beautiful handout that is about blood, basically a list of all the amazing things that you find in your blood. And on the back has another one about the lymphatic system. It's just, come on, it's our body. We need to know this. You need to be educated people. When you go to the doctor, doctors love to talk to people that understand what they are saying. So please, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you can apply it. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to entertain your questions and try to answer. If not, I'm sure Miss Lethart also will help me with the business. All right? Thank you very much.